Okay, thank you. And so I try to go visit Ruth, but obviously we had to cancel this year because who knows how long she'll be in good health. This woman was a teacher in California. She and her husband left California and got into real estate in Hawaii and did quite well. And she was a marathon runner. And so, and also she's got these trapeze rings in her living room. She's wild, but we had to cancel. So we're hoping to go to the Big Island next year to see her. Because again, I don't know how long she'll be with us, and I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's a big difference with us too. We have, my sister's 92 in California, and I'm saying, gosh, I've got to go visit her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, who's the 360-584 phone number?
I think that's me.
Oh, that's, or is that?
That's.
I think it's Mark.
That's me. That's Mark Gooden.
Mark Gooden.
Oh, hey, Mark. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to make sure. I think, what do I need? 6? Remind me.
You need 5.
5. Okay, so I think we have Greg.
3, 4.
We've got 5.
Mary Ellen, Cynthia. Yeah, we got 6 actually. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So, hello everyone. Good morning. This is Jim Cooper from the Olympia City Council. I'm going to call to order the Olympic Region Clean Air Agency meeting for December 9th and ask for introductions from our board members and then our staff and council. So how about I'll just call first names and then that way we can walk through it. So Cynthia?
Cynthia Pratt, representing the city of Lacey.
Joan?
Joan Cathy, the city of Tumwater.
Greg?
Greg Brotherton, Jefferson County.
Mary Ellen?
Mary Ellen Winborn, representing Clallam County.
Okay. Randy?
Randy Netherland, Mason County.
Okay, I believe that is all the board members. Did I miss any board members?
We don't have Wes and we don't have Mike Runyon. Is that correct? So
Okay, and I'll turn it over to Fran if you can walk us through the staff and council.
Okay. So for council, you guys want to introduce Jeff and Mike?
Jeff Myers.
With Mike Throgmorton ahead. Okay, Fran McNair, the executive director. Odell? You're muted, Odell.
No, it just took me a second. Odell Hadley, senior air monitoring specialist.
Dan?
Dan Nelson, public information officer.
Mark Gooden?
Mark Gooden, senior engineer.
How about Debbie?
Debbie Moody, office manager.
Robert?
Robert Moody, compliance manager.
And Lynn?
Lynn Harding, administrative services manager.
Miss anybody?
I think you got it.
Okay.
Wait, it looks like no one on the public line, just to be clear, but I'll keep an eye out and see if that changes. So are we good? Anybody have any problems with the agenda? Any changes? Okay. If everybody's okay with the agenda, just give me a quick thumbs up.
All the thumbs.
Okay, Randy, I see your thumb. You'd let me know, I know. So we have an agenda. Okay, wonderful. So that takes us to the chair report. And so I was hoping Wes would be here. This is Wes's last meeting on the ORCAA board. And so if he shows up, we'll take a minute and recognize that. But if you know Wes or you have a chance to check in with him and just say thank you for his service, that would be wonderful. He, I think besides, well, so he started in 2012, right around the time I did, maybe the same meeting. And I think maybe Cynthia is the only other board member that's been around that long or longer than that. So he's a long time serving board member and he's been really helpful in the conversation and, frankly, to, be able to do the finance committee without it being everyone from Thurston County. It's been really important to have someone from Mason or someone from Grays Harbor because it's close and been willing to play that role for quite a while. So thanks to Wes, wherever he is, and maybe Fran, if you could let him know that we said that today, and if he has anything to say back, we'd love to hear from him.
With that much time behind him,
I'll call and send him an email.
with that much time behind him, can we give him anything? Are we allowed to?
We normally, we've done things in the past. Dan, what have we done? I don't remember.
Cakes.
Cake, usually.
They've done cake, right? And then they get their name on a plaque in our conference room. It's kind of hard when we're doing this, virtually. But I think
years ago we would do a acrylic type desk plaque, and we haven't done that for a few years. I don't think. We did the cake and the public appreciation, and again we have the roll call of honor on the wall of the boardroom there. So.
And I told Jim that I'd gone down, I thought to, I think it was Mason County, I can't remember, but, got up before the commission and said some nice things. But, obviously that's not going to happen this year, so. But I will make contact with Wes. He's been great to work with and will be missed.
8 years, he deserves a little something for his desk at least. 8 years is a long time.
Yeah.
We can look at getting something for him. Well, I'll talk to Dan after the meeting. We can look at something.
Well, maybe there's like a bakery in Alma or something. You could just get him a gift certificate so that, just so he has some appreciation.
Okay, we'll look at that. Okay.
Cool. Okay. Anything else? Any other chairs reports? Cynthia, no finance report.
Oh.
Okay. So public comment, I don't see anyone signed in. As far as I can tell, there's no public on our call. They'll watch the recording later, hopefully. That takes us to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve it?
I move that we approve the consent agenda. Cynthia Pratt.
Greg Brotherton seconds.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions, comments, or polls? Just to point out, a little out of the ordinary, we have the Personnel Committee minutes because the Personnel Committee only meets episodically, and so we want to get those closed out and put them on the consent calendar. So with that, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. So that takes us to new business. We're going to hear a little bit about the Community Air Toxics Program. Fran, who are we going to for this?
Odell.
Odell.
Odell's been fabulous. As a matter of fact, she was up at Chica Peak yesterday. She drove up in the rain, fixed the Chica Peak, and drove back and is still doing the presentation today. So she had a very long day yesterday, like a 12-hour day yesterday. So.
Well, there must have been something in the air. I did too. So I feel your pain, Odell. Tell us what you have.
All right, I'm gonna, why do I have so many? There we go. I'm gonna share screens. All right, so do you guys have that?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. So I had a choice or an option between giving you the toxic summary, that project we had funded from EPA for 3 years, and it closed out this last month. So I've submitted the final report to EPA for internal review. And we did submit one paper for publication, which is also under review right now. I talked to Debbie about doing this presentation in January or February, but I thought it would be good to at least close it out with the board members that were here before we switch over to a new board and have to fill them in on what we were doing. So just to refresh your memory, this project started about 3 years ago. The primary objective, we wanted to look at hazardous air pollutants. That includes gases that were associated with wood smoke, PM 2.5, which is the main source of PM 2.5 in our region. And then a secondary objective was to improve and evaluate acrolein measurements. And we were doing that in partnership with Evergreen and their students. So that was sort of a long shot project. Acrolein is a difficult compound to work with, and EPA still doesn't have a real good method for evaluating it. There's a lot of uncertainties associated with it. So I thought it would be good to just throw it in the lap of some students and see what they do. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. So primary objective, what is that? Hold on. Okay, so what we did was we collected air samples at the Lacey monitoring site in Mountain View Elementary. We collected samples at least every 6 days and sometimes more frequently, and that was between August 2018 and May 2019. So we got the end of the summer and then the full wood smoke winter season. I used positive matrix factorization. It's a model which through a series of algorithms. I'm not going to get into it, but it will take all of the different compounds that we look at and we can use it to identify the primary sources of the PM 2.5, CO, and other toxic compounds that we were looking at. So the project we wanted to focus on was benzoapyrene, naphthalene, benzene, and acetaldehyde. And we determined that those were the most likely to negatively impact human health. Those were the highest associated with wood combustion and had the most or the highest toxicity associated with them. And then we assessed these hazardous air pollutants relative to the wood smoke PM 2.5 and CO, and not written here, but specifically the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. So one of the things I was looking at was, is the PM 2.5 National Ambient Air Quality Standard sufficiently protective of these other compounds as well? So does it provide a co-benefit for protecting us from compounds that we don't typically measure and that are pretty expensive and time-consuming to measure? So here's a pretty busy slide. This is the source profiles. This is an output from that positive matrix factorization. And I'm just going to point out, so the PM 2.5 from the nephelometer is the column on the most left-hand side, and the colors represent the different source contribution. So what this tells us is that this pink is associated with the aged wildfire smoke that we saw in August 2018. So during that time period, almost 60% of the PM 2.5 was from that wildfire smoke that we observed total across those 9 months. And then the other 30% was from wood smoke. And so it broke it up into low temperature wood combustion and high temperature wood combustion because they emit different ratios of these compounds. And then the last little bit, this green, is the background. So you'll also see some blues in here. That's from gas and diesel combustion. We don't see PM 2.5 associated with it. We know it's there, but it's so small that our monitors don't pick it up, and it doesn't really contribute that much to the mass of PM 2.5, so it didn't show up in the model. There is some uncertainty associated with these numbers. The other thing I want to point out is the carbon monoxide was pretty evenly distributed between these sources. So some was the wildfires, then we see another bit from the wood stoves, that's the yellow-red. About 15 to 20% was fossil fuel combustion, and then a background. So how I knew that this blue was fossil fuel is the trimethylbenzene. You see a huge percentage of the trimethylbenzene was associated with that source factor. And also toluene and MP-xylene are known tracers for fossil fuel gas and diesel combustion. We also see some naphthalene, which we know is from that. So it's a pretty characteristic profile for fossil fuel combustion. And then the other thing I want to point out is this big yellow block in here that's associated with low temperature or low efficiency wood stove combustion. And those are polyaromatic hydrocarbons. I'll get into that a little bit later. You see some of them associated with the high temp wood stove. But what's really interesting is even though it's all wood combustion, almost nothing was associated with the wildfire smoke. So what we see is there is a really significant difference in the chemical profile between wildfire smoke and wood stove smoke, even though it's all wood combustion. And then this background, I knew that this was background because it's associated with these trichlorofluoromethanes. This is basically CFCs, and the concentration was pretty even throughout the entire study period, and it matched what other studies have told us is the background concentration of these CFCs. Also, the background was a lot of the formaldehyde and the acetaldehyde. The surprise here was the acetylnitrile, which we expected to be associated with wood smoke, but turned out not to be so highly associated with wood smoke. There was a lot of uncertainty in that, but previous studies have said, this is a great tracer for wood smoke, but we didn't find that. So that was kind of an interesting effect. So carbon monoxide and PM 2.5 are highly correlated. They share very similar pollution sources, so that's not surprising. But what was really interesting is you'll see these highly correlated but two groups. And this line here is from the winter, CO versus PM 2.5. And this line here is during August of 2018. So when the PM 2.5 was really high, all these days were days that were impacted by wildfire smoke. And so you see this tight correlation, but it's very different. And so what this tells us is that wood stoves emit more CO per microgram of PM 2.5 relative to wildfires. And that's just because wildfires are so hot that the combustion is actually a lot more efficient. There's more oxygen, the fuel's dry, they burn hot, and so they just emit less CO per microgram of PM 2.5. This is the main results, the bulk, the most exciting part of the results. So I'm just showing 4 of all of those compounds that I showed in that other slide. So BAP is benzoate-pyrene, that's a major source. You can see these lines here. We have a high correlation between PM 2.5 and BAP in the wood stoves, but absolutely no BAP associated with the wildfire smoke. So that was really interesting. And benzoate-pyrene looks like this. It's just a bunch of benzene rings. It's 5 benzene rings added together. So that's what a polyaromatic hydrocarbon looks like, and they can get huge. I mean, you can get 10, 12 of these benzene rings together, and the lower the combustion efficiency, the more of these rings you'll get. So naphthalene is only 2 of these rings, and we see that we did see a correlation with the wildfire smoke. There is some naphthalene associated with it, but not nearly as much as you would expect in the wood stove smoke. Benzene, same story. We see a very tight correlation between the benzene and the PM 2.5, but less over here. So this is all of these compounds relative to PM 2.5. Acetaldehyde is interesting because there was actually more acetaldehyde associated with the PM 2.5 relative to wood stoves, and that's because acetaldehyde is made. It's created in the atmosphere from other VOCs that are emitted. And so the aged wildfire smoke, there was just more time for the acetaldehyde. And I apologize, I somehow moved this graph so these lines aren't matching up. But what these lines tell us, the red line is the concentration, that's the reference concentration. So that is what EPA has set as, we don't want to go over this concentration for chronic exposure, not for like a 124-hour exposure, but like chronic. And the blue line is where we see the annual National Ambient Air Quality Standard for PM 2.5. So in terms of this, we're not looking at 24-hour exposures, we're looking at chronic exposures. So what this tells us is that BAP at 12 micrograms per meter cubed, which is the annual standard for PM 2.5, we would be at a benzoate-pyrene level down here, about 0.5, and we want to stay under 2, which means that with respect to benzoate-pyrene, the NACS is sufficiently protective. Same story with naphthalene. As long as where these 2 lines cross is above this line, we're pretty much okay. Benzene, this is actually, this red line should be down here. This is where I messed up a little bit, but I moved this plot and so the lines shifted. But basically, if you visually shift these 2 lines down, the benzoate-pyrene, or the benzene, is at like 3 micrograms of PM 2.5, where we hit that carcinogenic screening level for EPA. And that's like the level where they say there's de minimis, there's no negative health impacts. At 100 times that concentration, they say that that would be elevated cancer risk. So somewhere between that, there's no health impact and this elevated cancer risk is where we're falling with the benzene at a PM 2.5 of 12. And then acetaldehyde, again, this got shifted up, but we're well above that line, so not a concern. So I'm going to switch over.
Actually,
yes.
On the documents you sent, they're the same as what you're talking about. They haven't shifted.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So you guys can look at those lines on the document that we sent, not this one. So you'll get a better sense of where those fall. That's great. Okay, and then the other thing I just want to point out here, which is really interesting to me, is the relative to CO. We can look at these. So CO is kind of a conservative tracer. We wouldn't expect these emissions to change that much from if the CO stays the same, then that means that the compound of interest is emitted in the same ratio to CO in the wildfire as it is in the wood stoves. So when they're really different like this means that there was some atmospheric transformation occurring during transport. But when we look at benzene, there's no statistical difference between the benzene and the PM2 versus the carbon monoxide in the wood stoves versus in the wildfire, which means that the benzene did not undergo transformation during smoke transport. The ratio of benzene to CO stayed the same, and that benzene is emitted in the same ratio to CO in wood stoves as it is in wildfires. So that's a really interesting result. And then lastly, because we didn't have a huge amount of data for our wildfire season in August, I got some results from the Seattle Beacon Hill site. These are these little X's, and those are the, they've been collecting toxics there. It's a NAT site. So this is the data from just last September during our just most recent wildfire season in 2020. And so you can see that these X's, they show the exact same results that we got in 2018 with respect to how these different compounds match up with carbon monoxide. And this is important because carbon monoxide is routinely monitored all over the country, unlike a lot of these toxics. So it's possible that we can start using some of this data to infer what these concentrations of these toxics are based on carbon monoxide and PM2.5 data. Okay, so that was a really dense slide. And then the other thing that was really interesting is we can use UV absorption measurements. We have how much, so we have infrared absorption and we have UV absorption. And the infrared absorption tells us about soot or black carbon, but the UV absorption indicates the presence of polyaromatic hydrocarbons. So the more of these little rings that you get, the more strongly they absorb UV light. In this case, the UV light is at 350 nanometers. And the CO and the UV are highly correlated. So in all of our data sets, no matter what season we looked at, we see this very, very high correlation between CO and UV absorption, which means that the CO and these PAHs are highly correlated. But more than that, we see that the CO and UV relationship is the same in the summer and the winter. And what this indicates is that the polyaromatic hydrocarbons are in fact emitted relative to CO. They're emitted the same in wildfires as they are in wood stoves, but that they are transformed or oxidized during transport. But even in their oxidized form, they're still there and they're still absorbing the UV. We just can't detect them with the methods that we're using to detect them. And so here's an example of naphthalene traveling along through the atmosphere. It interacts with ozone and UV, and suddenly it has these oxygen groups sitting on it. It's still able to absorb the UV. It has these rings that are going to do that. But our methods of detection no longer pick it up simply because it has these oxygens on it. So what it looks like is it's not there, which is what's happening with our benzoate pyrene. It's just become oxidized. So it's still in fact present in the wildfire smoke, just we don't see it. And the bad news is that oxidized PAHs are generally more toxic than their parent compounds. So our results show that the toxicity is probably a bit higher than what we're indicating with our measurements. So that's pretty much the summary of what we found with our field data. The hazardous air pollutants will exceed the carcinogenic screening levels for several pollutants at woodsmoke PM 2.5 equal to the annual national ambient air quality standard. So if they were to lower that a little bit, it would probably provide some added protection for some of these hazardous air pollutants. However, these same pollutants are unlikely to reach levels considered to be an elevated cancer risk by the same NAC. So we're above that de minimis level, but we're still below what they would consider an action level concentration. And then lastly, CO monitoring may be a good proxy for benzene and other pHs where the sources are limited to wood combustion or well-characterized sources. The second part of the project was the developing a method for acrolein sample collection and analysis. And they worked on that for a long time. They spent 2 years trying different things, evaluating different methods. But then when it came time to actually evaluate and produce method detection limits and statistical analysis on how good their method was, COVID happened and that restricted access to the lab, and it slowed down a lot of that final analysis. So they were able to get some preliminary results that indicated the method would be more sensitive to acrolein compared to EPA's current method, and that with the right laboratory equipment, they could really make that a better method for detecting acrolein. And I included a detailed description of all their work in the EPA's final report, which will be available to you once EPA accepts it. So if you really want the details of all this study, it'll be in there. I just didn't want to go into it because it's just really, really, really technical and science heavy. And it's all method development. So I'm not sure that it would be that interesting to you guys. But if it is, it'll be in there. And then the last thing I want to say is this was an unpredicted benefit of the study. We had no idea that EPA was going to have Eastern Research Group start analyzing our samples for ethylene oxide. So after we started the project and we started sending samples to Eastern Research Group, they started producing ethylene oxide data for us. ETO is a very toxic compound that has just recently gone through evaluation. And we did find in Lacey levels similar to those in Seattle, and they were above the carcinogenic regional screening level. That's this red line down here. So especially in the summer, in August of 2019, we saw some really high spikes of ETO. So still kind of in the process of seeing if we can figure out where those are coming from or if they're just background levels. And we're working with the Department of Ecology on a pilot study that was actually supposed to happen last August, but COVID delayed that. And I think we're now hoping to get those analyzers out next May. They were going to do it in the winter, but we looked at these data and thought, well, the levels are so low in the winter, we'd be better off shooting for spring or maybe into summer to try to get more signal. So that was kind of an interesting thing. So that is all I have on that. And if you have any questions.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
So because you used a lot of abbreviations and I tried to write them down, the very last slide said CRSL, which is what?
Oh, I am sorry. That is carcinogenic regional screening level. So EPA divides all the hazardous air pollutants into two categories. There's an RFC, which is for non-cancerous effects, and those are usually much higher. And then the carcinogenic screening levels are set. And so basically what that means is that they would not expect an additional cancer risk greater than 1 in a million people if they were exposed for a lifetime, like chronically exposed, which is why we use the annual standard rather than the 24-hour standard. So like you could be exposed for 24 hours and it wouldn't really have an effect. But if you were chronically exposed to that, or at an average similar to the.
Okay, thank you.
Odell, the last slide with the compound they added, is that a product of fire?
No.
It's not.
No. Ethylene oxide is found it's a sterilizer for medical equipment that can't handle heat. So any medical equipment that can't be put into an autoclave or heated, they sterilize with ETO. It's also used to fumigate spices to keep as a pesticide during transport. So foods and spices that are transported from Asia to here, they might use ETO to fumigate, but it should dissipate by the time it gets here. I don't know there are other sources it's used to manufacture compounds, several compounds, but I think we have very few sources. One of the things we need to look at is sometimes dentists or other smaller medical offices will use ETOs, like little desktop sterilizers that they just vent out the window. So with this recent evaluation that EPA has done that set that CRSL at a much lower concentration than previously, that's why suddenly they're interested in evaluating this, because they found elevated levels near plants. And oh gosh, I think Chicago is one area where they saw, and then, oh yeah, so Robert just said asphalt paving is a source of ETO. And that was one idea that we had, I forgot about that, for these high August values near Lacey. They were repaving College Street. They've been repaving College Street forever.
That's interesting.
But they were doing a lot of that over there. So that would be one possible source of seeing the elevated levels there too.
And that, would that also explain why it shows up in the urban areas and not out in the outlying areas?
So we don't have a lot, people haven't been measuring this for very long. We don't really know. So we were surprised that Lacey would show levels similar to Seattle. But one of the ideas, this Department of Ecology is going to borrow this online ETO analyzer that gives us hourly data. So we, instead of a 24-hour average, we'll actually see what that looks like throughout the day. And we're going to look at, they're going to leave it for a few days in Tacoma, in Lacey, and then we're actually going to install it out at the Raymond site. We're assuming Raymond is a true background coming off the ocean. So we can evaluate what we're seeing in urban areas where they have been studying it to what that looks like compared to a true background site. So it's kind of, depending on what they find, it may lead to a larger study or, they may not. So we'll see.
So before we move on, in summary, are there policy implications for us as a board that we should be thinking about, or is this really more about how we do the monitoring and assessment of the air quality?
Yeah, I mean, I think so far there was nothing I think that we would, as an agency, need to be concerned with. So I sent this report to EPA and we'll see kind of what their response is and what that review comes back at. The main thing is yeah, if we were anywhere close to the annual NAAQS for PM 2.5, we might need to be concerned, but we're not. So even though I would say lowering that annual NAAQS might provide some co-benefit and co-protection, our regions, our areas are well enough below that I'm not concerned that these compounds would be creating any kind of problem for our residents.
I think it's also interesting to look at the wildfire versus wood stoves in terms of what the impacts are. So,
right.
As we all know, this past summer with wildfire smoke coming up from California and Oregon, it was pretty toxic. But on an ongoing basis, wood stoves are still a problem.
Well, and I think to me that from a community education perspective is pretty significant. Like your local source is a lot worse.
Well, no, wait a minute though, because remember that this plot indicates that even though we're not seeing those toxic compounds in the wildfires, they're still there. That's what this UV absorption shows, that even in the summer, there's just as much of those polyaromatic hydrocarbons in the wildfire smoke. It's just that they've been oxidized during transport. So we're not able to measure them. We're not able to detect them. But the fact that the UV absorption stays the same and is so correlated with the CO, it indicates that even though we can't see them, they're still there. And they are in fact more toxic in their oxidized state than in their parent compound state.
But I guess for the takeaway for me though is, when you think about wildfires, you think about how toxic they are. I mean, look at what happened to our air quality this past summer. And to then be able to say on an equal scale almost, wood stoves are bad and people need to realize that. So the comparison, I think, is really significant.
Cool. That's helpful. I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you said it that way at the end, because now I feel like I understand this. You know, and you know, this is the not science heavy version of this presentation supposedly too. So it was fun.
Hey, I ran it by Debbie and she said it was okay. So I'm totally throwing her under the bus. I was like, is this gonna like fly? And she goes, I thought it was okay. I was like, Debbie approves.
Cynthia, did you have a question?
Outside ORCAA control focus group. No, I'm just kidding.
Cynthia, did you have
It
a
was great
question?
to see everybody lean in as you talked. So.
Cynthia, did you have a question?
I was going to ask, and this is just way out in the blue kind of thing when you talked about things. The fact that we're using a whole lot of sterilizing types of chemicals, do you think that now because of COVID, do you think that's even included in that or not? And sprays and whatever else?
I don't know. I have not thought about that at all, but.
I mean, it's totally out of left field, but I've just wondered, because that's what I do.
Well, no, the data though was so COVID was 2020 and this data stuff was done in 19.
Yeah, no, this wouldn't. I think she's just asking to hypothesize, would that have an effect on some of these?
Yeah, because I knew the data was here, but now 2020 is here and we're doing other things. So, okay.
Any other questions for Odell? Okay, thank you very much. Good job. That was a long process. And like, when did we start?
3 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
2018 is when we collected the data. We got the grant in November of 2017, so 3 years.
Well, way to keep ORCAA on the cutting edge, Odell.
Jim, I got an email from Wes. I'd like to read it to everybody, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
So Wes says, "Good morning. I apologize that I could not be on the Zoom meeting today. I'm transitioning into my new endeavor and have been exceptionally busy this month. I want to thank the staff at ORCAA over the last 8 years for their work. Thank you, Fran, for your great work in leading the agency. It's been a pleasure getting to know my colleagues on the Olympic Region Clean Air Agency. Serving my community on various boards and committees has been the experience of a lifetime. It was a humbling experience, and I have much more respect for elected officials today than I did in 2012 as a candidate. It's a difficult job. It's been a pleasure getting to know many of you from your various backgrounds over the years, and I wish you all good health and a prosperous future. Sincerely, Wes, come here." So I told him that I would email him back after the meeting, but that I asked him if it was okay if I read it. So I'm sorry he's not able to be on them, but he's here in spirit with us today, I guess.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I think, you know, just a reminder, in January, I'll be looking to appoint a new finance committee member. You know, so Greg and Mary Ellen and Joan, you might be considering whether you're willing to volunteer for something like that.
Yes.
Please pass our thanks on to Wes, Fran.
I will, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to the compliance report with Robert.
Good morning, all. I am here. I assume you can hear me now.
You have video, sir?
I do not have any video.
Okay.
We had some technical difficulties today. We shall get back to those another day and attempt to fix things. But at the moment, no, you just got me on phone. So, and yes, as you said, Jim, Odell's work really is cutting edge stuff. I mean, it's real sciencey stuff, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's we're learning things that nobody knows. So, I'd like to thank for that. On the compliance front, we're still doing our thing, getting out there, getting inspections done. We are doing more asbestos and demolition and land clearing inspections than we have historically, mostly because they're more one-on-one kind of, and they're outdoors. So we are focusing on those as well. In the complaint section there, you will see that you know, we're getting some marijuana complaint complaints, odor complaints here and there, mostly up near Chimicum and a few down in Central Park and Grace Harbor. And yes, we're still getting outdoor burn complaints, so no surprise there. And I think that is what I have for you this morning. Do we have questions?
I have just a couple. I noticed that in Lacey that there's been complaints about open fires on the homeless encampments and stuff. How are you handling that? I mean, they have open fires anyway, and so I know people complain, but is it causing undue problems, or I'm just curious how you would handle it.
So we are working, a bunch of them are on Department of Transportation right-of-ways.
Okay.
And we are working with Department of Transportation to address those concerns. Yes, we are, those are semi-regular complaints these days. And it is, by regulation, it's been illegal to have wood fires in the city limits of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater for almost 30 years now, 25 years plus. So,
but if they're in the right of way, if they're in the right of way, they're not exactly in our jurisdiction, are they, or not?
We would say yes, they are in the jurisdiction of ORCAA, but the landowner is Department of Transportation. So that's why we are slowly gaining a foothold with them to get some help in dealing with these issues.
Okay, that's what I was curious.
Cynthia, there's also a complicating factor because these established encampments, even though they are unauthorized, have been there for long enough that landowners like DOT are having difficulty removing them under the governor's eviction suspension. So that's a complicating factor. I know Lacey has had that issue in dealing with some homeless encampments that are on DOT right away as well.
Yeah, what we finally did is, at least with a couple of them, is that we're saying X amount can be here, but you can't add more people there. And then we're allowing them to stay, basically, but trying to limit it so that not more can come into that area, but stay at 20 or 25 or whatever it is. I think it's less than that, but.
We're also trying to work with the homeless coordinators in Lacey and in Olympia, and Dan's, developing material because there's no mailing address. So working with the homeless coordinators, trying to get out to the communities so that they can look for alternatives to burning. We don't want them burning garbage. So again, we're working sort of with the fire districts and fire departments and homeless coordinators on all fronts, basically.
Okay, that's good, because I was going to mention that maybe you need to do that, but if you're already working with our homeless coordinator, that's great.
Greg, can I do a follow-up on this real quick before you ask your question? So Fran, have we, or Robert, have we thought about purchasing some stoves to hand out to people in that situation?
I don't think that we want the liability. And I don't, I'd be very nervous about doing that. I mean, that's something that the homeless coordinators could take back to their local jurisdictions, or maybe it's something that DOT could participate in, but I'd be very hesitant to get into that.
Well, and I mean, maybe this is not an offline conversation, but I would question which liability is higher. But okay, thank you. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions. One, Robert, just about the the ongoing complaints against the Treehawk Farms in Chimicum. I think we've discussed this before, but just reassure me that this is an ag land, so there's not really a requirement for them to mitigate the smells. So do you guys just tell them thank you for the complaint and they're not doing anything wrong, or what kind of response do you give?
We are actually stopping by there when we're up in the northern county areas. So every 2 to 3 weeks, we're in that neighborhood. So we do stop by to see what we smell. There are still odor regulations for ag land as well. They are more restrictive, they restrict enforcement, but there are still some regulations. To date, we have, again, on one of the visits, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks ago, so before Thanksgiving sometime anyhow, we did find a faint odor of marijuana. And, you know, as the complainants have noticed, it is probably related to harvest time. So there's usually a couple-week window in there where they're harvesting, and that's when the odors are most prevalent, I guess.
Okay, but we've never gotten anywhere close to the point of a notice of violation for this farm or anything, right?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And then my second question is, and I'm sorry to blindside you with this, but apparently 2020 has sapped my ability to be proactive and get ahead of the game. But I'm curious about the application from the 10,000 Year Institute for biochar permit for basically a pilot program for a kind of a different kind of burn barrel in forest land to take care of some of the Scotch broom that's been harvested. And I'm wondering if you could give us an update on that.
So most of that now has been turned back to DNR. That 1000 Year Institute will go through them to seek special permits through them. It falls under weed abatement, so that's why it would be under a DNR permit. So we've had some conversations as far as suggestions more than anything else, as far as techniques and other ideas. So, but as far as the permitting end of it, looks like it's going to go through DNR.
Okay, and I guess just to follow up, is there any way that we can incentivize or advocate for this? I think as a policy position, if we can take, whether it's weed burning or slash piles and, less of it is combusted into the atmosphere, that creates, by definition, as I understand, less wood smoke in the air. I'm just wondering if that's something that ORCAA can take a policy position on.
That one I'd let Fran answer specifically, but generally the piles that they have shown me, with the exception of one out on the Hoh River Delta area, are relatively small in comparison. Especially to one of our land clearing burns or DNR silvicultural burns. These are relatively small.
I'm also working with, kind of behind the scenes, trying to see if Rainier, which is the largest private landowner in Jefferson County, would, take their slash piles, char them, and redistribute them over the forest floor to enhance growth and also to secure that carbon into the soil. So I don't think that the policy position is limited to just this one proposal, but as I understand, burn barrels, are banned because they have a tendency to spark and contribute to wildfire. But if you're doing a top-down burn, with an air egress at the bottom, the same risk of the burn barrel is not there of sparking. So there's not the dangers that make them illegal, but I'm just wondering if putting some focus on that from ORCAA might assist in making those more legitimate.
We can certainly look at that. I have not been involved in those conversations that Robert's talking about, so he and I can chat afterwards.
Yeah,
Hey, Greg, if you don't mind sending us a little bit about the stuff you're talking about, just so we can do some reading, it'd be cool.
Yeah, I'll send. I mean, even the Senate, there's a new goal of the state Senate to support biochar efforts as well. So I'll shoot some information to Fran or to Debbie to distribute to me.
You can send it to me and I'll get it to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Robert, I was curious, are your demolition and asbestos permits high for getting ready to go into winter?
That's a fair question that, yeah, I think we are a little elevated compared to where we normally would have been. I think society right at the moment is kind of an interesting, there's a split between, we've talked about the homeless. I think there is also the group that says, well, I can buy this house, tear it down and build my dream home. So I think there is some splitting of society that is happening during this COVID event. And so, yeah, off the cuff, yeah, I would say yes, we have an increase in permits, both for asbestos abatement and demolition, and land clearing, except for land clearing is kind of seasonal, so they're hitting the rains now, so they're not so anxious to do any land clearing burn.
Yeah, it's interesting. That dichotomy is really hard, but that's also an economic sign of the bigger picture we've looked at too. So thank you.
So Jim,
have a comment?
Jim, I know that Mark's going to talk about this, but Sierra Pacific, they had dry kilns that they were putting through a permitting process, and they sell a lot of their lumber to the big box stores, and so the demand for their product has gone way up. So that also shows us sort of what the economy is doing in terms of that portion of it also.
We also, Mary Ellen said in the chat that her permits are up this year too. And before we got our November numbers, the city of Olympia was tracking at 2019 sales tax too. So it's phenomenal. Like I've never seen finance people so like scattered. Like it's really a tough environment to predict anything. So for that, Robert, and the addition, Mary Ellen. Okay, so any more questions for Robert? Okay, so we'll move on now to the engineering report. Mark.
Good morning. I'm here, but just via phone only, not video. So I'll just give some highlights and then open it up for questions. Starting on page 1 of the Industrial Commercial Air Permits report, we have Capital City Press in Tumwater that received approval now to increase their ink usage and to install a new printer. They're a printing company, and the emissions that result from their operations are largely volatile organic compounds that include air toxics. So our engineer on this one, Lauren Wybrew, has worked this application to completion, and this one will actually has went out the door just this week. So it'll be final for next board meeting report. And I'm just mentioning it because it is a local Tumwater company, and you wouldn't know that they're emitting anything, but they do. They emit volatile organic compounds. On page 2, you'll see on the top of the page, Crown Cork and Seal, and they actually have a couple applications on the list. They're a beverage can manufacturing company located in Olympia and right off Phones Road. And as you go there to Home Depot, you could see them, and you wouldn't know that they're emitting anything either, but they have in their process of manufacturing cans, it includes coating them with varnishes, and that process results in emissions of volatile organic compounds, including air toxics, including compounds like formaldehyde. And so Crown Cork and Seal, their latest proposal is to modify their operations by including a third can manufacturing line and they're replacing ovens. Jennifer DeMay is the engineer working on this, and she's doing a real good job. The result of Crown's proposal here will result in significant emissions increases. However, they're also, part of their proposal is to add what's called a regenerative thermal oxidizer, which is it'll be a new control device for them, and it'll take all the emissions from their can manufacturing operations and essentially oxidize all the volatiles. So the addition of this regenerative thermal oxidizer will reduce their emissions, and the net effect of their proposal will be insignificant minor increases of certain pollutants and decreases in other pollutants. So this one's pending, and I just thought I'd mention it because it is such a visible facility in Olympia. On page 3, we have Sierra Pacific Industries lumber mill. ORCAA's engineer Aaron Manley is working on this one. And I'm mentioning this one because Aaron just started the public notice and comment period for this case. SPI Lumber, Sierra Pacific Industries Lumber, they're proposing to replace all of their dry kilns. They commenced this project without filing a notice of construction, and Robert is working on an enforcement action there, and that's pending. But SPI Lumber, as soon as they were notified, they submitted their notice of construction application and have been diligent in working with ORCAA to get it to final completion. In addition to replacing their dry kilns, they are also requesting an increase in the lumber drying throughput, and the result of that is an increase in emissions. And for that reason, because of the magnitude of the increase in emissions, they triggered a what we refer to as a Tier 2 health impact assessment, which needs Department of Ecology's review and approval. So the status of this SPI lumber case is that the Department of Ecology has finalized their approval and provided that to ORCAA, and ORCAA has finalized their review, and we are now in the public notice and comment period, which will end January 8th of 21. And so this is a significant project for SPI Lumber in Aberdeen, and I thought I'd mention it. Moving along, also on page 3, you'll see Silver Springs Organics. They're a composting facility located in Thurston County. This application is on standby right now. ORCAA, I'm personally working on this case. We completed a preliminary determination and have sent that off to Silver Springs, and because our determination was that they needed additional controls in their composting operation, and we just simply have not heard back from Silver Springs. So this one's on standstill. The ball's in their court, so to speak. We'd like to hear back from them, and well, we need to hear back from them before we proceed. And then what doesn't show up on this list here, but is noteworthy, is Grays Harbor Energy, which operates a very large power plant in Grays Harbor County at the Satsop Industrial Park. They're located just west of the two big inoperable cooling towers that you could see as you head out to Aberdeen. Grays Harbor Energy, they're an existing power plant, gas-fired power plant, and they're proposing upgrades to their 2 gas-fired combustion turbines. ORCAA is the contractor for the Energy Facility Siting Environmental Council, and we've been working with FSEC and the Department of Ecology on a recent proposal by Grays Harbor Energy to upgrade their 2 combustion turbines. Their upgrades will increase efficiency of the 2 turbines, but also increase their fuel usage and therefore their emissions. And so this project is a fairly big project, and so I thought I'd mention it too. And those are the highlights from the list. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that ORCAA's Title V program. Title V is the program that we implement for our very biggest sources of emissions. We have 11, what they refer to as major sources of emissions. And for those major sources of emissions, we issue air operating permits that need to be renewed every 5 years. Well, EPA recently audited our program in September, and they issued a final report September 29th. ORCAA was obligated to respond to the final report, which we did so on November 10th. And then tomorrow, actually, we have our hopefully last meeting with EPA to go over not only their final report, but our responses to their findings. And as soon as that is completed, I'll hand it over to Fran and Debbie, and if the board wants to see it, it certainly can be made available. But that hopefully will be all finalized tomorrow. And I could say that there were not any significant findings. The things that EPA pointed out were largely things to improve ORCAA's program, and were concerns and issues that are largely common throughout the entire state. So other air agencies have had similar findings. So just wanted to let the board know about that. And with that, I'll close my report unless I have any questions.
So one more thing for Mark, in this evaluation, they also went back and looked, the last time they'd done an evaluation, I think was 2007, Mark, is that right? And they showed that, because they looked at what their comments were in 2007 and where things are today. And again, staff are doing a great job. There were significant improvements based upon their evaluation of 2007 to 2020. So, again, engineering staff are doing a really fine job, and I think EPA recognizes that. So I just want to point that out also.
Nice. Other questions for Mark? I just wanted to lift up Crown, Cork, and Seal. It's a pretty significant investment that they're making in that third line. It's somewhere around 100 new machinist jobs coming to the region. And they're entry level, and they're hiring right now. So if you know anyone, they got to work at night, but being a machinist would just about be worth working at night. So. Okay, so that takes us on to air quality program update. Back to Odell.
Odell, are you there?
Hey. Sorry. I was multitasking, I confess. Okay. So this will be nice and short. Even though it's 2 months summary, October and November. So October, we start to see a couple of moderate days, 3 in Lacey and 4 in Port Angeles. We did have some problems with the Port Angeles monitor, and so we lost some data there. About a week of data, we needed an instrument, had to be replaced. And then the Lacey, we lost some data, were invalidated. Or Chesapeake, we had we needed the monitor to be calibrated, so we lost some data there too, about a week as well. And then November, we see a few more moderate days. Shelton is the winner in Mason County for November. I'm not quite sure why, but it had 6, 2 in Lacey and 3 in Port Angeles. And then Chesapeake again lost a couple of days of data. We were having some problems with the data logger not booting properly after power loss, and that turned out to be a bigger problem this month. And that's one of the things I was fixing yesterday when I was up there. So that's all fixed now. Other monitoring news. So we were able to get one of our audits in with the Department of Ecology to go up to Chesapeake. And that was in early October. That was a really long day. Usually when we do an audit, we go up, we stay the night, and it's a 2-day process. Beth and I went up. We took separate vehicles because couldn't drive in the same car. And we had to do it in 1 day, which made for a 16-hour day. So that was a pretty long day. Then I have written a negative COVID-19 test is now required to access CPO. So that was true last week. And I was trying to figure out how to get up there, and there was a 5-day window, which delayed my trip. And then on Friday, I got an email that said, actually, we changed our minds because you're not making any stops. You don't need to have that test. So that is great news for me because that gives me a lot more flexibility in getting up there in a timely manner. I mentioned Port Angeles. So that was 3 trips between Nick and I, both of us going up there different days to identify the problem and then bring back the bad monitor and then bring a good one up. So we split that time. I was able to finish that toxics report and get that sent off to EPA in November. So that is currently going through internal review there. And that took really the bulk of my time in October and November finishing that up. Still doing some Northwest AirQuest meetings. And then there were several meetings with Ecology and the Department of Natural Resources and the National Weather Service. And that was to follow up the cross-agency coordination during future wildfire smoke events and also in air stagnation events. So there's a lot of coordination that's happening between us, between Puget Sound Clean Air, between Ecology, the National Weather Service. There's statewide coordination, and then there's the regional coordination. So really trying to get that streamlined and working better than we have it now. And then we've started evaluating low-cost air sensors, and that would include the purple air, which we've already been doing, but we're starting to add a few others to that. And Dan and I have been working on our website to start giving out guidance to the public on installing these sensors and how to interpret the data and how to use them. After that wildfire smoke event, the number of purple air sensors in Thurston County doubled. So we are really starting to see, we've got, I think, 8 outside ones. And then the same thing happened up in Jefferson County as well, seeing a lot more of those sensors. And so people are going to be looking to get good data out of those. And so I'm actually going to end there and turn it over to Dan because I know he's speaking next. And Dan is actually got 2 different air sensors installed at his house. And so that's our new step in evaluating those. And I'll let him talk about that.
Well, Dan, I want one.
So I actually bought one. I have my own Met station. I'm a weather geek, so I put up a Met tower on our roof here in our new Thurston County home, enjoying our residents down here in east of Lacey. So I appreciate being down here. But again, I put up a Met station, and the ambient weather company offers a PM 2.5 add-on. And so I talked to them. I went ahead and got that. The benefits of that is it's very low cost. It's roughly $75 retail to go with their monitor or their weather station. It's battery backed up, solar powered, so wire free, wireless connection if you have a Wi-Fi hub in your home. And it's had some anomalies, but it seems to be tracking fairly closely to what I see on the other monitors around me. And then, as Odell said, I've got one of ORCAA's purple air monitors she gave me to mount next to this, and I operated that for a while on landline power. Thanks to my outdoor connections, I have a supply of various solar panels and battery backup. So I've been experimenting with powering the purple air with solar using remote battery backup, so we can untether them from the home. And that's something we want to look at for future use as well, and make them more versatile. I had a couple failures with that, in that I had old battery backup, so it worked great during the day, and then at midnight they would shut off because the battery backups were failing. But they were old backup or old batteries, and I got goal 0 to replace those, and it seems to be operating flawlessly the past couple weeks. Cynthia, you have your hand up and your mic muted.
I always forget. So I know you have to make a calculation with the purple air monitor. Do you have to make a calculation with the other one?
The other one does not have a correction factor, and I'm leaving it to Odell to evaluate that data to see how it tracks with purple air and with our NEF. So but purple air does now, I think Odell mentioned last meeting, there is a EPA correction factor that's plugged into the purple air network that's easily applied, and seems to be the best correction factor for that.
Okay.
And we have posted, as Odell mentioned, a new page on our website linked to our current air monitoring page, dealing with personal air monitoring devices and explaining what's out there, as well as the way to set them, evaluate the data. So Odell did a great job doing a really concise but detailed recommendations on how to set those up and evaluate the data. So you can find that on our website. I think Odell did a much better job than we've seen from other air agencies. Lane Regional, for instance, has done a ton of work with purple air, but they have a detailed technical novel describing how to evaluate their data, so that the amount of detail and text you have to wade through is ridiculous and drives most people away from the website, whereas Odell was able to consolidate the information in a very easy to understand few paragraphs and made it far more useful. So
Dan, let's give credit. Let's give credit where it's due. The only reason I didn't write a novel is because you and Debbie have been training me for 8 years.
Well, we'll leave it to Debbie's credit then. So that's on the air monitoring new webpage. The home monitors here that Odell's using the data I'm pulling from our backyard. I will note, just in passing, we've been working preliminarily on a new grant, working cooperatively with Spokane Regional Clean Air for a grant from EPA to hopefully, if we get this, we would work with local schools to put purple air monitors in the hands of students during the summer months, so they could put a pair of purple airs in their homes, one inside, one outside, so we could compare indoor and outdoor air during these wildfire events. And we're again partnering with Spokane Regional Air as an Eastern Washington clean air agency, roughly the same size as us, so we can get the different east-west data, and as well as share some of the work and responsibility. So I'm excited about that, and I know Odell is, and we've got a preliminary meeting tomorrow morning on Zoom with the Spokane, our counterparts in monitoring and outreach. So we'll keep you posted on that. But again, that's very preliminary, but it's something I'm excited about. Other news, we haven't had a burn ban yet. We have had a reduction or a voluntary call for reducing burning last week, and that went over well. I don't know, I didn't look at the numbers to see if that had a big impact on our data, but I know some of the other local area agencies, especially in Eastern Washington, had to call some burn bans last week and earlier this week, and we have not had to do that, and fingers crossed we won't have to this year. On the wood stove side of things, we are way ahead of the curve on expending the funds. It's been a very successful program. I'm looking at probably mid-January, we would fully commit the dollars. We haven't fully expended them, but I've got a commitment for nearly all of our available funds. So I'm hoping by the first of the year, I'll be able to go back to the state and say, if you have any dollars left, we'll take them. So I'll again keep you posted on that. One other interesting note on that, and I'll do a little self-promotion of ORCAA. Our program has been so successful. We were one of the first in the country to really push the idea of wood stove replacement. Doesn't make sense if you're just putting another wood burning device in. And working with Fran, we really pushed the idea of replacing wood burning devices with ductless heat pumps. And I've talked to air agencies around the country about our program over the last several years, including Utah and most recently Oregon DEQ last year. I spent a lot of time explaining our program and our rationale. And just about 30 minutes ago, I got an email that EPA has awarded $1.8 million to air quality improvements in Clallam Falls, Oregon. And they're largely basing their program on what we talked about of replacing wood with ductless heat pumps. So we're not mentioned in the grant, obviously, but I know our success has driven a lot of these programs to follow suit. So I'm proud of that. And I think as a board, you should be too.
Did we apply?
We did not qualify for that grant. That was a very targeted to a very problematic valley down there in Southern Oregon.
Got it. Nice work. That's cool.
So that's about all I've got for you. I will note just in passing on the previous discussion with Robert, our asbestos permit data is available online. We post all of our past and current asbestos permits on our website under the public records section on the homepage. So you can track how those change year to year. It looks like we're up maybe 10 or 15% in permits for at least October, November.
Wow. Thank you. Any other questions for Dan? Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to go to Lynn for finance.
Good morning, all. Hope you all doing fine, safe, looking forward. So a few items, courtesy reminder that we have our finance committee meeting next month on the 13th. So we'll be covering the first 6 months and conducting a detailed review and reporting back to the full board. Recently, I completed the agency's annual reporting to the state auditor's office. I expect to receive an email or a phone call from SAO scheduling our fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020 audit. This will be a first, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes because it'll all be done in a remote effort. Building update, we have recently made our December 1 debt service payment, and we have a balance of $92,023 for our debt on the building. Woohoo! Yes, that's pretty exciting. And our final payment will be on, looks like January 2020, here it is right here. It will be on January 2022. So definitely a day to ink on the calendar. We had our carpets cleaned on the north side of the building where our tenants reside. And it's just, we contracted with our janitor and he did a phenomenal job and it really looks good and it really needed it as well. So something we try to do every 12 to 18 months. And it's the common area that really needs it. The tenants were extremely pleased. And let's see. So just a really brief recap of our budget where we are. 5 months into the year with a board approved budget of $2,562,000. We've received about 42% of our revenue. That's where we should be 5 months into the year. And with our expenditures, we're at about 39%, so slightly below. So both revenue and expenditures were on target. And as you know, ORCAA has an active wellness committee. And during this time, it's even more important, right? And so the committee consisting of myself, Erin Manley, and Ellie Feet, we try to bring, healthy activities with our, remote connections. And because with only 3 or 4 of us here at the office, it definitely it takes an effort. And our most recent activity that we started on Friday, Yoga Friday, for about 15 minutes, all done remotely. And we're averaging about 10 employees out of 16 Yoga Fridays. It's really a success. And, you need to be inquiring and finding out from your staff, employees, what is it that is going to bring resources to them to promote the positive, decisions and healthy behaviors. So this is definitely one that's successful. And I want to do a shout out to Seamus, who is one of our newest employees. So it'll be 2 years in April, who leads us in our weekly yoga. So let's see. And keeping busy here, it's pretty amazing the amount of work that is at the office when few folks are around. But I think there's a lot of time that's effort getting a hold of folks in a remote way. But anyhow, all is good. Hope all is great with y'all there, and entertain any questions if you have any.
Questions for Lynn? Well, I just say I look forward to seeing you all in person for a mortgage burning party in a year. That'll
nice.
Sort of related to that, Lynn, because my mind jumps to the money that will be free, and how could we deploy it to help us reduce our costs long term. And one of the things I've been kind of holding back on is thinking about whether we could look at installing solar system on our building, and that would then reduce our power consumption over time as well. And just wondered, you and Frank can talk about whether you'd be interested in taking this year to look at the possibilities for that project, so we could kind of time it with paying off that mortgage.
You bet. And it's a good subject area. We have looked at that twice in almost 18 years I've been here. And the last time that Fran and I looked at this is when we contacted the old general administration building and talked to their engineers. And it was a fairly elaborate conversation and site visit. And then prior to that, I think it happened in 2007. So it's almost like every 10 years we're looking at this. And the investment that ORCAA needed to come up with up front was pretty phenomenal. And when we looked at how long it would take to retrieve the benefits of that, it was fairly lengthy. But that's been a while now, and we know that the cost of solar has been decreased considerably. So maybe now is the time to look at that again.
Well, and the community, I don't know if others have this happening, but the community solar model that we have happening in Olympia is working on its second or third project kick right now, and they just started installing their first project on the top of the Hands-On Children's Museum, and they sold shares to the project, and the city did essentially a lease on the rooftop for $1 to this nonprofit, and their system will sit on top, and it's paid for by investors from the community who will get paid back, and a lot of them contributed those funds to local nonprofits, and then we own the system when it's paid off and get the power savings right away. So it's a really cool model where, other than having to upgrade the roof because it wasn't done well the first time, there's no upfront investment for the city.
Well, maybe tying it in with the fact that we have a roof replacement in our 5-year building maintenance plan, this might be a good opportunity to kind of twofold these items together. And good suggestion, Jim. And yes, I'll definitely work with Fran on that. And
cool.
Jim, question: the community solar project. Who would we contact to find out more about that?
So it's a local nonprofit called Olympia Community Solar, and Mason Rolfe is the CEO. And the fastest way would be to call Rich Hoy at the city, and he'll give you his number.
Okay, thank you.
And Jim, I would just point out, as the messaging police, we will be shredding the mortgage, not burning it.
Right. Robert reminded me of that. We have to shred it, not.
We'll do it in one of Greg's newfangled burn barrels.
And Ty has joined us now.
Welcome, Ty. Thank you for that, Dan.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm late, guys.
Oh, I'm
Does that mean
sorry.
you're done with your budget?
Wait.
I am going to have to leave in 3 minutes. I have another meeting.
Okay. All right, we're going to kick it to Fran for the last item.
Okay, so a few things. I mentioned this to Jim before the meeting started. What I'm going to do is send an email out after this meeting, hopefully getting to folks before they take off for the holidays if they're taking off. I'm hoping that all of you stay on the board. You've been great board members, and we really appreciate it. With Wes leaving, we know that there'll be a new person for Grace Harbor, and what's his name? Tim Cross has been Mike Runyon's stand, and he was community development in Pacific County. He's left or is about to leave employment with Pacific County. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the story is going to be. And so what I'd like to do is send an email out I'll include you folks on the board, the mayors or county commissioner, who's the chair, and then the staff person, either city manager, whatever the designated person is in terms of, and say that we're hoping that you all stay on the board and that you could have as a backup an employee if you didn't want to, as an alternative to having an elected official, just to give you more choice or more options for who your backup would be. But I do hope you'll all stay on our board because you've been fabulous board members.
Ryan, can I just ask a quick question about that? Sure. Do our bylaws allow staff to be the primary, or do we have to be the primary?
I'm not sure that the bylaws deal with it. I think that it's the RCW. Well, I can only take from my own experience, and I'd have to go back and look at the RCW to see if it's changed. But when I was on the Puget Sound Clean Air Board, I was on for the county executive. I was the deputy county executive, and I was on for him. The only thing I couldn't do was I couldn't chair the board, but I could be the primary person, and I was the primary person for him. And I'm not sure if there's something in the RCW that says that or not, but that was my own experience, and I did that for 8 years, so okay. I know it can be done.
Yeah, I was just gonna throw that out as another alternative too, is if it's really some of these counties especially only have 3 people, and they have as many interlocals as I do in the city with 7 people, and so having a solid staff person that could provide continuity is another option that we would be totally open to, I think. So.
And I'll check that out before I send out the email. But if it's an option, I'll include it if that's okay with the board.
Cool.
Jim, is your question about the alternate position, or whether a staff non-elected official can serve as the board member?
It's the board member. So so if Ty was going to be really busy next year, could he appoint his community planning and development director instead of an elected official?
Go ahead.
I'll take a look. I'll take a look at that and let Fran know so that she can advise everybody.
So I thought,
my own
I'm
experience.
I'm almost certain at one point Art Starry was the designated board member for Thurston County for at least 1 year.
That's what I was just going to say.
Okay.
I have to run. Bye-bye, guys.
Okay, bye. Have a
Sorry
good
to
holiday.
interrupt, man. Thank you. That's helpful because I think people are thinking about that as they reorganize. So.
Okay, and so I will mention that. As I say, I did it for 8 years, so the only thing I couldn't do is I couldn't be the chair. Okay, moving on. So, you know, when Governor Inslee on the 14th of what was it? I forget even. 14th of December? No, we're in December now. It must have been November. Said that we needed to again try to hunker down a little bit more, and was talking about reducing the number of people. That's why we only have 4 people in the office right now, just so you know. So everybody is working remotely. So the people that are here for the most part are Robert and I switch off, Debbie and Lynn and Jackie. So it's been interesting for me because being here, you know, and not having staff, I've gotten a lot of phone calls from citizens, good, bad, and indifferent, and it's been kind of interesting to do that, to be right here and be and as a matter of fact, on Monday, it was just Jackie and myself. And I got quite a few phone calls asking questions about air quality, about our programs, and it's kind of been, and people were very nice. I also got a call from a woman who had gotten Dan's email that went out, I think, last week, basically, you know, saying that she really appreciated the fact that even though we didn't have a burn ban, you know, that we were sending out a reminder, please, you know, don't burn if you don't have to. And we recognize that there are kids that are home, so that homes need to be kept warm during the day because they're not in school. So people may be using their fireplaces or their wood stoves more regularly than they were other times. And she really appreciated the fact that we were concerned about that. And she said she's got a fireplace, and you know what? She's not going to use her fireplace because she recognizes that it could be a problem. Even though, again, we didn't have to put in a burn ban, and we had developed this email that he sent out and put it on social media because we thought at the onset when we were having these conversations that there might be an air quality, there might be an inversion, air quality inversion that was going to prompt this, but the inversion wasn't what we thought it was going to be. But we still thought it was a good idea to send out this message to try to say to folks, you know, please, if you don't have to burn, there are alternative methods, please don't do it. And so I got some good feedback. Also had a conversation with a gentleman that called me about, he wasn't sure where he wanted to live. And so he was asking me questions about outdoor burning and wood stoves, etc. So it's been kind of an interesting process, you know, talking to folks about this. As a reminder, in January, we will have on the agenda talking about our air operating program. There were questions that came up in the finance committee, and we're going to talk about how we calculate a little bit more about the program in general, but more in terms of how it's funded, how we calculate what to charge the 10 air operating permits that we've got, and how we do that calculation. So we'll be doing that in January. And in February, we'll be talking about outdoor burning, which was also an issue that we wanted to bring up, and we've been putting on our ORCAA website where there are land clearing burns, where people can burn, and so we want to talk a little bit more about the relationship between complaints and where people are burning, and looking at if we've had a complaint and people are burning, you know, are they one-time complaints? How effective are we at dealing with the concern that the person called in about in terms of recidivism? So that would be part of the agenda. And then I also want to give a real thank you to a variety of folks. So Mark mentioned Sierra Pacific, the dry kilns. This was a real team effort to get this thing through. Aaron was the engineer on it. Mark and Robert played significant roles. And our attorney, Jeff, was great in terms of working with Jim Lynch, the attorney for SPI. And Ecology was wonderful about really pushing this thing along. We were getting pressured by the owner of SPI, and of course we were not going to, I understood his concerns, but we needed to make sure that the process was done properly. And as Mark said, we're still in the public comment period until the 8th of January. But staff worked really hard on this. They worked collaboratively, you know, together as a group, even though we were all remote. And, you know, basically said to SPI, we need to go through this process. So they got it, they've gotten 2 notices of violation. One had to do with not getting a demolition permit. And Kurt, the staff person that I've been working with at SPI, they're not gonna, if they've got 8, they've replaced 2, they're gonna do 2 at a time. And I said to Kurt, make sure that you know, they've already done the asbestos, so they know that's okay. And their demolition permit's good for a year. And so Kurt said, we're not gonna take 2 more down until the spring, you know. He said, I take full responsibility for not getting the notice of construction in on time. So he really came forward and said, you know, they messed up. But again, they're trying to do the right thing, and we want to work with them. They have to obviously work within the confines of the law. So we hope that everything will go smoothly from this point on, and then on January 9th, they'll be able to fire up those 2 new dry kilns and, you know, keep the process going. But they are very appreciative of the fact that we worked with them within the law and, you know, didn't cut any corners, and they understood what our process was. And I think they have been and will continue to be good partners in the environmental world with us. So I wanted to mention that. And I think those were my comments, and just want to wish everybody a happy and hopefully healthy holiday season. Stay home with your family. Don't be doing any big parties. And I look forward to having you back in person. I hope sometime in the 1st or 2nd quarter of next year. I'm enthusiastic about the vaccines that are coming out, and hope we can all take part in those vaccines and get back to working in person. So I know for me, the holiday season is hard. I have a grandson with a birthday, a son with a birthday. Hanukkah starts Thursday night, and we're not going to be able to do any of those things. So next, I look to 2021. So with that, that's my comments.
Yeah. Enjoy that time with your immediate family at home and plan for a big year next year. That's a great. Okay, anything for the good of the order?
Just a merry blessed Christmas to all of you.
Yeah. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and whatever your tradition is. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on January 13th.
See you on January. Take care. Please stay healthy.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.